The wedding night begins in the heart of the Vatican. The long banquet hall gleams with golden light from hundreds of candles. The smell of roasted peacock, venison glazed with honey, and spiced wine hangs in the air. Courtiers in shimmering brocade whisper behind jeweled fans, their eyes darting to the bride. She is only 22, yet her name already carries the weight of scandal across Europe. Lucrezia Borgia. Tonight she is dressed in a gown of white silk embroidered with gold thread, her hair braided with pearls. She smiles when spoken to, but behind her calm eyes, she knows what everyone else knows. This marriage is no union of hearts. It is a weapon, an alliance, a bargain struck in flesh and blood. In Renaissance Rome, every feast, every smile, every marriage carried the metallic taste of power. To understand why Lucrezia's night would become so grotesque, you must first understand the world around her. Renaissance Italy was not one united kingdom, but a patchwork of city-states, each with its own armies, its own rulers, and its own ambitions. Venice ruled the seas. Milan stood as a fortress of steel and strategy. Naples glittered with wealth, and at the center, like a spider in a web, sat the papacy in Rome. The Pope was not only a spiritual leader, he was a political king, commanding soldiers, forging alliances, and toppling enemies. And this Pope, Alexander VI, belonged to the Borgia family. Few names stirred as much fear and fascination. Whispers of poison, corruption, and forbidden love surrounded them. Lucrezia's father and her brother Cesare were infamous for their ruthless ambition. To them, every ally was temporary, every rival disposable, and Lucrezia herself was their most valuable bargaining chip. Lucrezia was no stranger to being used in this brutal game. Her first marriage was to Giovanni Sforza, a man humiliated before all of Italy when her family declared the marriage void on the grounds of his supposed impotence. The accusation was likely false, but it destroyed his honor forever. Her second marriage was to Alfonso of Aragon, a man she may have truly loved, but love meant nothing in the halls of power. Alfonso was stabbed one evening and later strangled as he lay recovering. Murder, it was whispered, ordered by her own brother Cesare. Imagine, then, what it meant for her to walk into a third marriage. Twice a widow, her reputation tainted, her life already scarred by betrayal. Yet despite it all, she carried herself with dignity, her beauty and her poise undimmed. She had learned that in this world, survival was a form of victory. Her third husband was Alfonso d'Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara. His family, the Este, were old and noble, proud of their ancient bloodline. To them, the Borgias were new money, hungry and ruthless. They distrusted Lucrezia, and they distrusted her father even more. And so they made a demand that even by the standards of Renaissance Italy seemed cruel. They wanted proof that the marriage was real, that it had been consummated, that Alfonso was no impotent fool, and Lucrezia no barren woman. Without proof, they feared Rome might later annul the match, leaving their son disgraced. And so, as if sealing a contract, they required the marriage bed to be witnessed, the act itself to be observed and recorded. Notaries would stand as if the bridal chamber were a courtroom, and Lucrezia's most private moment the evidence. For the Este family, this was security. For Lucrezia, it was humiliation of the deepest kind. And so, when the banquet ended and the music fell silent, Lucrezia and Alfonso were led not to a private chamber, but to a stage set for witnesses. The bed was draped in silk, the curtains half drawn. But behind those curtains, clerics, nobles, and envoys gathered, their eyes sharp, their quills ready. They stood solemnly, some pretending to avert their gaze, others staring intently, as if watching a sacred ritual. In truth, it was no ritual. It was a performance, a grotesque play in which the bride and groom were actors, their bodies the script, their movements the seal of the alliance. Not once, but 3 times before dawn, the act was repeated, leaving no doubt, no escape. The record was signed not on parchment, but on flesh, and the whispers of what had been done spread across Italy faster than the morning light. Within days, the story was everywhere. Letters carried the whispers from Rome to Milan, from Venice to Florence. Nobles laughed behind closed doors. Courtiers gossiped in candlelit chambers. The Borgias had given away their daughter like livestock at auction, some said. Others argued the Est were wise, protecting themselves from the poisonous games of the Vatican. Yet through the laughter, through the scandal, one truth remained. The marriage was beyond dispute. The alliance was sealed. Ferrara had its guarantee. And Lucrezia, though humiliated, had survived the night. What was meant to weaken her would, in time, make her stronger. The Lucrezia who entered Ferrara was not broken. Instead, she rose with grace. She dazzled the court with her beauty, her wit, and her elegance. She held salons where poets recited verses and philosophers debated ancient wisdom. Guests who came expecting scandal left speaking of her brilliance. Slowly, the whispers changed. Perhaps she was not just Borgia corruption, but something finer, an Good Duchess of culture and refinement. She commissioned artworks, funded convents, and surrounded herself with music and poetry. In a world where her body had been made into a ledger, she created a new theater of power, one where she was the director, not the victim. When Alfonso went to war, Lucrezia ruled in his place. She issued decrees, mediated disputes, and guided the duchy through difficult years. Her people came to admire her not only for her beauty, but for her wisdom and fairness. They called her the Good Duchess. The young woman once humiliated before strangers now stood as a ruler beloved by her subjects. Her shame had been transformed into strength, her humiliation into a crown. She had been forced to play a role, but she mastered it so completely that it became her throne. Even today, scholars still argue about Lucrezia. Did she secretly resent the role forced upon her? Or did she quietly enjoy the power it gave her? Her letters are careful, her voice always measured, her secrets forever hidden. But the result is undeniable. The woman who was forced to endure one of the most humiliating nights in history became a duchess admired for her grace, her brilliance, and her strength. The bed that was meant to degrade her became the foundation of her throne. And so tonight, as you drift into sleep, remember this. Even in the darkest humiliation, power can be found. Even in the cruelest stage, one can learn to perform and endure. May the story of Lucrezia Borgia carry you gently into rest. Good night.